Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain Vik, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. We are here in the studio as always. Sheriff Wagner is back from elk hunting. How did that go?
Oh, it was very successful.
Yeah?
Yep, all three of us filled our tags, and great weather and great friends and good food and
Super.
a little more.
Super. Better than some years.
Better than some years.
Elk-wise, at least.
Elk-wise, weather-wise,
Yeah.
a lot of wises.
Well, good. Chief Deputy Ben Houchin here.
Yeah, I'm always here, and
Holding down the fort while I'm gone.
what ends up happening is I leave, nothing happens. He leaves, and
Everything happens.
Everything happens.
Yeah. Well, that's sometimes how it goes. But we did bring somebody else into the studio today to try and keep us in line, and that is none other than former Sergeant Larry Russell, now retired. Thanks for being here.
Very much so retired.
Very much so retired. Well, we brought you in today to talk about aviation at LSO, and there's a pretty rich aviation history here, and you had a lot to do with that. But before we start talking about all of the various things that went into that program, we want to know a little bit about you. So where are you from, and how did Larry become Larry?
Well, I was actually born in the military.
Yeah.
My dad was in the Army Air Corps, in Orlando, Florida. And we got transferred to Japan. I got to start grade school outside of Tokyo. Mm-hmm. From there to Keesler Air Force Base, Biloxi, Mississippi for 6 years. And from there to high school in Wiesbaden, Germany. And about 1 month into my senior year, we were transferred back to Illinois, to Chanute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois. And that's where I began flying. There was a Aero Club stationed there. I was 16, 17 years old, and I thought, hey, this looks like this would be fun. So I started flying a little Piper PA-12, little Piper Cub. And then from there, pretty much moved on. I never did get my private at that time, but I moved on to college. After high school, went to University of Mississippi. And
Is that Old Miss?
Hotty Toddy.
Is that Old Miss?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay.
Hotty Toddy.
Okay.
So from there, then I joined the Air Force.
Yeah.
And went to Lackland. When I was finally stationed at the air base here, Lincoln, I walked in, my first shirt there was my dad's best friend from Japan. And when I joined the police department, went in there, dispatcher there, and I started grade school together in Japan.
Wow.
Small world.
I mean, yeah.
Now, when you were in the Air Force, did you fly?
No.
No. Oh, you didn't. Okay.
No, getting to that part after Lackland.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. After Lackland, they said, well, we'll keep you here. You can play baseball for us. And I said, play baseball? And said, yeah, we understand you played ball. And I said, yeah, well, I did. And so I said, no, I don't want to do that. So they sent me to computer school at Amarillo. And
I lived there 5 years. Yeah.
5 years. You know Amarillo well.
Yes.
So from that, after graduating from my computer school, my first duty assignment was Lincoln, Nebraska. And of course, moving all over the world as I was growing up, I had no idea where Lincoln, Nebraska was located. And I arrived here and found that the people in this community is just unreal as far as liking the Air Force personnel or dependents. Wherever we had lived throughout all these Air Force bases, there was always a rub between the community and the air base, independence.
Yep.
So here we turned out that, boy, these people they were nice. So after we closed, I was here when we closed the base down in 66 and moved to K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in Marquette, Michigan. And from there I got out of the service and came back to Lincoln. As I also mentioned, John, earlier, this is something, when you're a dependent all your life and you're so accustomed to military life, boy, the civilian lifestyle is really different, and it's hard to acclimate yourself to it. So I went down, and I understand the police department was hiring. I went down and visited with Dale Adams and got hired. And from there, we went to the part where we got involved with the helicopter system that the police department had. And one day I was contacted by Sheriff Karnopp. Hey, we're going to get a helicopter. How'd you like to fly for us? And I thought, gosh, this would be a no-brainer. Little bitty community like Lincoln to fly around to 880 square miles of the county. So that was a no-brainer. We just moved over to the sheriff's office, and that's where I began here.
What year was that?
1973.
Okay. And how long were you at the PD?
6 years.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
I started in 68 and moved over in 73.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, you were telling that story earlier about, getting to Lincoln, Nebraska, and then your first shirt was, you said he was your dad's best friend?
yes,
All the way back from Japan.
right.
So I remember from my Air Force days, even, basic training and stuff, that one of our drill instructors, talked about the Air Force as kind of one of the smaller branches, kind of just like a big company. And so that it's smaller than you think, and you run into some of those people again throughout your career. And I've had the same thing happen. So
It is amazing. When I was in high school in Germany, I didn't have too much to do with dating. And the coach of the football team says, you will attend this banquet and you will bring a date. Well, I met a girl there that was rather popular, and she agreed to go with me. And here, years later, I'm at Chanute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois. I had the opportunity to go to Orlando, where I was born, and to cut to chase here, I'm walking down the main street in Orlando, and I meet this girl, the same one from, it was 4 or 5 years later. And it's kind of amazing, like you said. Gosh, you run into a lot of people that you met throughout your life.
small world. So had law enforcement ever been on your radar? Or, I mean, you said you didn't do law enforcement stuff in the military specifically.
No, I did not. Getting back to the part where you're semi-military, you've got the uniforms, you have the ranking system, the structure, and you get pretty comfortable back in that role again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it fit in very well with me. So.
Were you now? You had been a private. You had a private pilot's license. Had you flown helicopters before you came to LSO?
Yes.
Okay.
I flew I was the first pilot with the police department.
Oh, okay.
Their helicopter. When I got out of the service, one of the other things I did do when I came back to Lincoln is I went out to the air base here, and went to the FBO, Lincoln Aviation, and used my GI Bill. I accelerated through and got all my ratings, my commercial instrument, rotorcraft, multi-engine, and I even got a rotorcraft instructor rating, all through the GI Bill.
Okay.
So that's where my background
Okay.
came.
That's
pretty
how you
much
got.
from
That's how you got
flying.
into helicopter stuff. Okay.
When you moved on over to LSO, that obviously was related to aviation at that point. So, what had you walk us kind of through your law enforcement career up to that point? I mean, did you have any other specialized roles, or did you fly at LPD before you came over here?
I had initially with the police department, you start out by walking the beat, and 11, 12 months later, you get a cruiser, and they're 2-man cars.
Okay.
From that, I got into the canines. I had my own dog for about a year. The Inspector Sodden with the police department at the time got a federal grant. They wanted to get involved with rotorcraft, with helicopter.
Okay.
And I immediately thought, well, hey, this would be something I could get involved in, which I did. And they wouldn't let me have both the dog and fly the helicopter, but so no more dog.
Yeah.
You need a long leash on the helicopter. Yeah.
Real long.
And you knew which one you wanted to keep. So.
Oh, yes. Fine boy. So we from there flew the helicopter, and as time went on, as I had alluded to earlier, Sheriff Karnopp knew that they were going to be getting one, and incidentally on that particular item, that helicopter was obtained through the civil defense. It was a public use surplus helicopter, and if you go back and you look at MASH, you see the helicopter we're talking about.
The old Bubble Bell.
The
Yeah.
Bubble Bell. In the military, it's an OH-13S is what it was called, and they had modified it with tanks and different things that we got involved with. We took the helicopter, and 086 was the
Yep.
initial
The radio call signal.
radio call for that particular helicopter. And we went through the paint shop with it and put our sheriff's decals on it.
I pulled up a picture of
Oh,
it,
yeah.
so we'll put this on social media later. But
Yeah, that's it. It was ferried to us from Montana, is where it came from, and prior to that, it was in Vietnam. This particular helicopter, I believe, was made in 1964. Was the date of it, and we took it. And then the next photo is primarily, or the next thing would be the after picture of how we painted and put the sheriff's emblem on it.
yep. And I think you said that was there's one here of you and Sheriff Karnopp, but there's another one with you and the Gage County Sheriff at the time.
We
Was that Fred Steinkamp?
yes,
Okay.
yes, it is. They had the floods of the Blue River in through Beatrice, and they needed to have some observation, aerial observation. So he contacted Sheriff Karnopp, of which I flew down to Beatrice and picked him up. And that particular photograph is just prior to takeoff and touring the Blue.
So what was a daily routine for you? Were you assigned to the helicopter all the time, or how did that go about and work?
Not exactly. I actually wound up with many, many hats. After patrol, I got in the criminal division, and while in the criminal division, I was given the opportunity to attend the FBI National Academy, which I went to in 1978.
78, was it 78?
78.
You drove that red, white, and blue Pinto back there. I remember that.
That's the one. that's the Firebird. You don't want to get hit in the back with one of those. And then that was from there. I came back. At the time we were still doing some flying because it was a rather comical event with speech class at the FBI Academy. You had to go up and give a talk. And I mentioned something about flying, and I was the chief pilot. And of course, they were yucking about that. And I said, of course, I'm the only pilot. So they like that. At any rate, so after that, we came back, and then I got involved with, in the criminal division, we started documenting a lot of deaths through the Dr. Pappenfuss, through the autopsies. And I began videoing autopsies, and primarily for if something happens in the future and we have to go to court or some reason. And at the time, district court would not allow any video in court, especially of autopsies. Dr. Pappenfuss passed away. We had a case going at the time. It was basically a shake your baby, and the baby died. They sent my video down to another pathologist in St. Louis who was able to testify. So, and they introduced it into district court. So I felt pretty good about at least.
I can't imagine them not wanting video, because I mean today that's all they want.
Yeah.
Hey, that's just
well,
mind-boggling.
The videotaping an autopsy is a little out of the norm. It's not, but certainly not what juries see.
But they are always a little slow to adopt the next technology, because there's a lot of hoops that you got to get through. So
when I started in '76 here, you didn't fly every day. It was there might have been, if there was a string of burglaries and there's some kind of pattern to those burglaries, Larry'd go airborne and try to find out who was burglarizing businesses at night. I remember hunting for people at Branstoke Lake, having the doors off the helicopter and flying, and what a fun job.
What technology did you have on that other than your eyes?
Night sun. And this thing was bright. There was a spotlight on that thing.
Oh, really?
I got chewed out by the chief pilot there for shining it in a house, because it would light up the inside of a house at night.
Is that the light bulb on the bottom there?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the landing light.
That's a landing light.
Oh, that's the landing light.
This is prior to having the night sun. And and Terry's right. If you turn that on at night, the sun came out.
Yeah.
People, and along the same line.
Oh, really?
Well, along that same line, and as far as been with the activity of, we would go out and look for marijuana fields where they're growing, getting to be popular. I got involved with a situation one time where I got a U-Haul truck with 500 pounds of marijuana down in Hickman, and they had just picked it, locally. So at any rate, we tried to identify and see what it would look like and document the fields in the county. Also, on a sad note, we at one time, there was a individual on a snowmobile with a couple of occupants that zipped out on the Wagon Train Lake when it was frozen, and they went in.
Wasn't quite frozen enough.
No, well, in one part of the lake there is actually a stream that goes through, and it didn't really get that solidified. One of the occupants was able to crawl out and make it to shore and did call for help. Everybody arrived, and they couldn't find where the snowmobile went in. So I got called. I went in with a helicopter. We lit it up, and we found the snowmobile and so forth.
Funny, because you only lived about 4 miles from that lake, but you had to drive clear into Lincoln to the airport to get the helicopter to fly back down there.
That's true.
So could you get up high enough so people on the ground wouldn't know that you were watching them or being around?
We would get to this later, but I have to admit, the helicopter is something that I'd have to be awful darn high for you not to know I'm there.
Right.
Where today we've got these drones that I have 2 of them, and you can sneak up with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's
with those.
It's
Right.
difficult to mask the boop, 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 boop with the blades. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, and it's hard to say that all the time. Boop, boop, boop. So
What did you say? You said that when we were talking before we came on, that I think your maximum altitude, you had to struggle to get up high enough to talk to the tower, right? Or talk to
There was-
Minneapolis. Is that what it was?
correct. There was one occasion that I was flying at night, and I had Byford Bruce with me as my observer. I was contacted by the tower saying Air Force aircraft has identified or located an ELT, and they wanted us to go look for it. I checked with the sheriff's office.
What's ELT? What's that?
Emergency
Locator transmitter.
Okay.
when a plane crashes.
Normally, correct. They do go off accidentally. And so, talking about climbing, in order for me to get vectors to the location where this ELT was sounding, I had to get altitude because Minneapolis couldn't see me at the altitude I normally fly about.
Radio's down, phone's down. We're good.
Okay, so the
So-
ELT, and you're trying to get a vector from.
Victor.
From Minneapolis.
I've had that joke. I've got Vic in my name, so
Okay.
I've had that joke a couple times.
He's trying to get his vector, Victor.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And
But surely you can't mean it. Oh,
Don't call me Shirley.
so, at any rate, I got up to about 3,000 feet where they could identify me. They gave me a squawk where you tune a 4-digit number up on your transponder. And they gave me vectors down to, and I almost got to Hebron. There was an Air Force aircraft above that was flying around that kept saying, well, you're getting closer, type of a thing. Then I started picking up the ELT. This particular helicopter, being where it was from, did have an array of listening devices on it, radio-wise, and antennas that I was able to pick up the ELT transmitter and located the airplane. Unfortunately, there was a fatality there, and the kids and the pilot and so forth that were transported, we ultimately got them into Hebron. I got a hold of the National Guard. They sent a Huey down and transported them back to Lincoln. And on further with that, as we had talked about, I showed you one photograph that I was demoing the helicopter to a local school. And in the audience are those same 3 kids. And of course, this was
Much later.
much later. One of them still had a cast on his arm, but that was,
that skinny guy in the picture there, Larry.
I was at one time.
We all were.
So did you landed at the crash scene?
Yes, I did. Byford got out and went over and checked the aircraft, and yes, it was quite a ordeal. The pilot, and I won't name the parties, but the pilot himself knew that he needed assistance, needed help, and gosh, he had gone ahead, and his face impacted the panel, and he was in really bad shape. He had crawled out of the airplane, went over to a county road close by, and got assistance. And then they were able to get the rest of the parties into Hebron itself.
So was that those kinds of missions that you described? Were those really? Was that the mission of the aviation unit back then? It was the kind of the search and rescue, law enforcement support operations, things like that. Was that kind of the bulk of what you were doing? Training, obviously.
We did operations. We did work with the State Patrol. I was able to communicate with them through. the helicopter in our low band that we had the frequency of. I was involved with some high-speed chases, and strictly going back a bit, part of the patrol is when you would go out and actually be of assistance of anything that may occur at the time, or you're looking for something. And as Sheriff had alluded to earlier, if we had some known areas that we wanted to watch and look for, that's what we would be doing. But on a daily basis, cost effective, it is not. You look at a helicopter, rule of thumb, for every hour you fly, you have 2 hours of maintenance. And jumping to that part of it real quick, the sheriff's office hired a mechanic who both was a helicopter mechanic, and for justification of his salary, he also worked on the cruisers. So we had a two-way deal going. We had our own little heliport, our own fuel farm, and it was ideal for the situation with running the helicopter. We did a cost basis on what it cost us per hour to operate, as opposed to what the city was paying for per hour operation. And we were a fourth the cost.
Oh, wow.
Mainly because we had our own mechanic, and we had all these things that helped us.
Had your own little hangar out there at 300 South Coddington and helipad.
That's where we're Boyd would throw tools.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever help with traffic enforcement on that, or did they have that technology at that point in time to be able for you guys to do?
You know, it's a shame we didn't have a FLIR system or something that we could use on that. But a lot of the times I would chase cars down. Our max speed was like 70 miles an hour on the helicopter on these particular ones. And but I would run down and I'd call down and I'd say, hey, I've got a guy that's high speed southbound on 68th Street or what have you. And that was a lot more often than not, because that was one thing you would look for is obviously some sort of a traffic violation or something you could work at, and possibly get them captured that way by air. On the chases, gosh, over the years there was quite a few that I got involved in that we assisted the state. They had actually a party that was firing or shooting back at them, and it was out on the interstate. And I was able to hover down pretty much close enough that we could be of assistance, or they knew we were there. And
What was your, how long could that helicopter stay in the air? From a fuel perspective, how long could that helicopter stay in the air?
Each tank was a 56-gallon tank.
Okay.
And we like to on all of our, and that's funny that you would ask that. I did think that. How long did I stay up each time? I went back through my logbook.
4 hours? Is that about right?
3 to 4.
Okay.
And you brought your logbook right in today.
Just
Still got it.
Just for reference, because earlier we had a situation where when we got into our airplane end of it aspect, Sheriff and I went back to New York, and I could not remember the year, but I know it was a long flight. He enjoyed it.
Well, we have a listener email here. Speaking of stories about the helicopter, that was from a Mr. Coleman that was asking about a crash with the helicopter.
I heard it was horrible.
I've heard now it was from 2 feet to 100 feet. This was a situation that once we got the helicopter, being a military aircraft, we were not given, or we were on their mailing list for TOs or technical orders. A 3-foot fiberglass antenna that was mounted on the tail system was supposed to, every 100 hours, be magnaflux, checked for any damage, breakage, and so forth. And this we didn't know about, but I was actually...
You learned.
Oh, boy. 100 feet.
Yeah.
I had Mr. Coleman with me, and we were doing auto rotations. I wanted to give him an idea. Hey, this is what it's like. If you lose the engine, these things glide. You know, come on, people. They don't crash. But part of the aspect of doing an auto rotation, when you get closer to the ground, you pull the nose up pretty good to stop flaring, and you hit a right pedal pretty hard, and that turns the tail rotor where it sucks in whatever is there. It just happens that antenna broke off and was sucked into that tail rotor system.
Uh-oh.
Yes, on the uh-oh. So I just rolled it over and clamped down, and we were about 3 feet above the ground at the time.
That's not the story how high you were that I've heard.
But I did hear from my passenger, Mr. Coleman, that he said a few words, and he says, you know, you may want to look now, but your tail rotor's sitting right outside my door here. So, yes, and then later on, the media had Lancaster County helicopter crashes, and that's not the way it happened.
Okay.
Now, stemming from that, hey, well, how did you keep flying? What's going on? You got a damaged piece of property here. Thanks to Duncan Aviation, they let us use their helicopter trailer, and this was not an overnight situation, but we were able to get another identical helicopter to use as parts. And the chief deputy and I, yes. He wasn't chief deputy then, was he?
Del Zimmer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What?
I mean, he was when I started in 76. So
Okay, so Del and I loaded up, went to Tucson, Arizona, and went into the boneyard, and they had a couple of helicopters picked out that we could look at, of which we did, and we found this one particular, and they loaded on the trailer for us, and we drove back, and the rest is history. We got
So you scavenged that helicopter to fix our helicopter?
Right. Now, the main rotor blades are only good for so many hours. Then you've got to get rid of them. Well, when the tail rotor system broke apart, it came up and it damaged the main blades. So obviously we weren't able to use those. And they're very expensive, more so. So we got another set of blades, and it works out that we were able to get it back together. Our mechanic worked day and night, got it up. I did the test flying for it, and it was great. We were able to keep using it.
I was dispatching one night, and I remember you lost manifold pressure, and landed at 27th and Superior at the old Midwest Speedway parking lot. And I don't know if that was classified as a crash or not, but I think you came down quicker than you'd like to.
When you're flying along and you start losing power, you begin to wonder what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
So...
And I can just remember that. You need to say that.
Well, I had Carl Keach with me, and as the observer that particular night. And one of the things you do when you're involved with learning to fly helicopters, you learn the part about making a run-on landing, where you literally skid on as if you had wheels. And it's a very gentle, easy thing. And that's what I did, right up the same place. And to carry that on a little more, we called our mechanic, and he came out. He walked over to a house under construction where they had the wire flags in the ground to designate power or whatever. He pulled that out of the ground, walked over to the back of the helicopter, and I looked at, and in essence, the blower system, turbocharger, had separated, one big tube separated from another. And he took that wire and wired it back up and said, okay, let's go. And I said, wait a minute. You're going to ride with me now. And I put Carl out of the car, out of the helicopter, and we flew back to our hangar.
No, wait. You had your mechanic fly with you?
You're darn right.
So if you get to a crash, who's going to fix it?
Wouldn't have mattered much then,
One thing you do as you go on in time, whether it be the helicopter or the airplanes, you really learn to trust your mechanic. I mean, you have a good working relation with them.
I didn't have such a good working relationship with him, but that's all right.
Yeah. So it turned out that worked out real well. So.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
So, not all of the stories about the helicopter involved, crashing or tall tales about how high you were, but there's a picture we've got up here with you and Sheriff Karnopp, and you're presenting a trophy to a young gal. What's going on here?
We, through the DARE program, after we got the helicopter, thought, well, hey, this would be kind of neat. We got to get these kids to name it. We had a contest. Let's name the helicopter. And this young lady, as I recall, I think she's from Waverly, and I honestly do not remember her name, but she named it the Karnoppter, and that hit with the sheriff, and the rest is history.
I never knew Sheriff Karnopp, but just the legacy stories that I can see how, for what I know of him, I could see that he would like that.
Yeah, he was a good guy to work for.
Yeah. So there's a picture. Yeah, she's getting a trophy, and then there's another picture. We'll put these all online too, but standing there.
And there's your award winner right there.
Right there. Yep, group of school kids there. So wow, that's pretty cool. What other stories about the Karnoppter? Any other stories?
We don't have time.
We can save that for another episode.
Yes,
it's always kind of fun. I'm a district car on patrol, and Larry's all of a sudden something happens or something, and they said, go get the helicopter and go do whatever, and he always needed it. Now they call them TFOs, Tactical Flight Officer, and we're training some deputies to do that for the state patrol. But so my tactical flight operations training with Larry was to use that night sun, to use our radio and not to transmit over the helicopter's radio, And that was really about all I think you told me what that one handle thing does, but in case you got conked out. But yeah, but it was kind of fun when you were working and Larry was working. If he had to go up, he had to have somebody with him, and then you got a chance to fly for a while. It really was fun.
Neat.
Another little cheek and thumb deer. We had a CB radio in our helicopter.
Oh.
And 10-4 good buddy. And it was sort of fun to go down the interstate because we would get these 18-wheelers just fogging. And I was known as the Flying CM. That'd be the Flying County Mounty.
Okay.
And we would light that thing. Well, first of all, we would make contact with, hey, good buddy, and this and that. And on and on. They're Flying CM here. How you doing today? And on and on. And, well, where are you? I said, well, I'm right behind you. And, well, I don't see you. I said, wait a minute, I'll turn my lights on. And turn on night sunlight. And, you'd hear all sorts of things. But it was, no, I didn't do that all the time because, obviously I got to be out there doing real work. But some of these guys, you slow them down. And they, all of a sudden you hear on the radio, hey, you got a County Mounty flying here. You got a blah, 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 blah. That's cool.
Yeah.
There's a little deterrent
paying
there.
attention. Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. Huh.
You bet.
So what was it? What led to the demise of the helicopter? How did we? Did we get a fixed wing before we?
Didn't it just hour out, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah,
It got to be where we couldn't afford it.
And did we have a fixed wing before we got rid of the helicopter, or?
No, we did not.
Okay. So eventually it just got too expensive to maintain and to keep, and decision was made that we're moving on from the Karnoppter.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's pretty much the end of this, is how our fixed wing division went away also. It got to be not cost effective any longer. And because, as I mentioned earlier, if we were a jet prop.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the fixed wing. So after the helicopter, we'll pull up this picture because we'll have this on eventually too. But we ended up, where did we find the fixed wing?
This particular airplane that you're showing is a Piper Navajo. The serial number is 67, and it was born in 67. So it's not an antique as far as aircraft goes, but it's an older airplane. It initially came from the state of Iowa. I think it was a public power they had in the state. A salesperson with Lincoln Aviation here in Lincoln knew that we were looking for a twin-engine airplane because we had a single engine for roughly 3 years prior to this.
Oh, okay.
And because of the single engine and flying to California in a single engine over the mountains and so forth, it gets a little risky.
And for people that don't know, what are the reasons that we'd fly to California?
Extradition.
Okay.
We would get a fugitive from justice that wanted to be extradited back to our jurisdiction, and from that we would go bring them back.
Sure. So originally, we never used the helicopter to do that, though, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
But we had a single engine. What was the single engine?
That particular, the first one we had was a 6-passenger single engine Piper.
Okay.
And the one that we wound up with that we used the longest, there's an interesting story behind that airplane. It initially was used as a drug runner in the state of Florida. The aircraft landed on a beach. It was confiscated, and it was, as a lot of times in particular drug cases, it was confiscated and, hey, it's ours. We were able to get the helicopter, the particular airplane, which is a T-tail Lance.
Okay.
It's a Piper 6-passenger. And the only thing we had to do was get it certificated. And that being, it went back through the Piper factory, as it were, and we got it certificated. And we flew down to Lakeland, Florida, and flew it back. And from that, we used that particular airplane for about 6 years. About 3 years prior to getting this. And in doing that, we learned a lot about aircraft having T-tails.
Oh.
It was a ground lover. On takeoffs, it didn't want to go as far as getting off the ground. Once you did, it was a very nice airplane to fly. And 300 horsepower, turbocharged, and it had the power.
So eventually we upgraded then to the Navajo, the twin engine.
It was interesting that after the trips that we had made with this particular airplane and our thought process, Sheriff Adams at the time brought it before the county commissioners saying, you know, if we're going to be doing this, it'd be nice if we had that safety factor of having a twin engine airplane, especially in the routes that you have to take over to get to the West Coast. And it was approved, and we initially we tried several other twins, different brand names and so forth, and we landed on this particular one, and it's I flew it for 17 years, and it's quite an airplane.
So there's a black and white picture that you've shared with us, and we'll post this. But this was actually featured, you said, in the Nebraska Sheriff's Magazine?
Yes. It was on the front page of, it was interesting. The individuals that are in the picture are, we have Mr. Yardley.
Yep. Well, Sergeant Mike Novacek next to you.
Novacek and Joe Spleakle.
Yep, Joe Spleakle on the end, and then Owen Yardley in the middle there.
And we have them cuffs. We needed to show bad guys coming off this airplane. So we got 2 of them with cuffs on, and it was very interesting. Well received.
Mike looks a little badder than Owen in that picture. I don't know.
Well, that was our first. I mean, they were working the warrant detail back then, so that's why those 2 guys, they were partners.
Looked a little rough.
Looked a little rough around the
Okay,
edges. Yeah.
all right. Got the jean jacket on there. That's cool.
One interesting thing with that, part of our duties with that particular airplane is if we were going to fly to out west anywhere, and we had somebody to pick up in Scottsbluff, say, I mean, it was easy to go out and back in Scottsbluff. And one day I was in Sydney, and the sheriff came out, looked at the plane, said, hey, this is kind of cool, and blah, blah, on and on. You know, it'd be easier if you could just call us by radio. We'll come out and bring the prisoner out to you, and you don't have to get out and come in and blah, blah. And I said, great, but I don't have a 39.9 radio. He said, wait a minute. And he went and got a 39.9 radio.
Yeah.
And gave it to us, and we were able to install it
Really?
in this airplane. And it has a, it's on that picture. It doesn't show it. There it is. You see another antenna right between the 2. That particular is a 39.9. And there we would take off from Lincoln and climb, hit altitudes, call Scottsbluff and say we'll be there in 40 minutes. And
Wow.
they had our guy out, or wherever we went. And that was an interesting story. I thought the sheriff was very receptive.
Daryl
Johnson?
Daryl Johnson.
Sure.
Yep, and I think that article with the Nebraska Sheriff's Association magazine was Flying Sheriffs, because Daryl, I think, was a pilot then as
Correct.
well.
That's right.
And we had a plane. I think we had the only 2 aircraft for sheriff's offices in the state at that time, I think.
Did you ever have a co-pilot? Other than someone who just, was taught how to use the Night Sun?
Well, we had initially another deputy that was also qualified.
Okay.
He was instrument rated and multi-engine and so forth.
Because I'm just thinking, if I'm flying with Larry on the way to California, and if something happens to Larry, what do I do?
Well, Otto flew a lot.
Okay.
Otto was my co-pilot.
Okay.
How does it do how does it land?
The flying part
Very
seems
hard.
fine, but yeah, it's the landing that I'm worried about.
Anybody can fly. It's landing, and it's tough,
Now, I gotta tell you about that, because we spoke about Mr. Coleman earlier. I'm waiting at the airport, waiting for I'm going after a female
Okay.
fugitive, and I typically will take a female deputy with me. And I'm out at the airplane waiting and Mr. Coleman shows up with my passenger who's going to go with me. And she has with her, she had a blanket and a pillow.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, oh, okay. So now this is a 8-passenger airplane.
Yep.
You have the flight deck, which has the pilot and the co-pilot seats, and then there's a curtain,
Yep.
and then you have the club seating in the back. Well, she gets up and goes to the right, because I always fly on the left side, and she said, "Can you move my seat up a little more? I want to reach these pedals." And I'm saying, "What for?" "Well, I just want to be able to push on them." I said, "No, you don't." So, and then I said, "Well, what's the pillow here for?" And she says, "Well, Mr. Coleman told me that you weren't feeling too good, and in the event you had a heart attack, I want to take this pillow and put it in front of my face so they'll recognize me." Well, and I said, you gotta be. And that's Mr. Coleman pulling
Okay. All right.
pulling another one on me.
All right.
That made my day there.
So eventually, we talked about it on a previous episode. It was September 11th. We were going to sell the twin engine Navajo.
Well, back up a little bit.
Go ahead.
2 years before September 11th, so it would have been 2009. I think they raised our insurance rates. They doubled our insurance rates.
99.
99, sorry.
Yep.
And, they said, nationwide piston-driven aircraft accident rates were sky high and yada, yada, yada. And Larry had over 4,000 hours in that aircraft, I think, with never a safety glitch. So we decided to ground the aircraft for a year and do our extraditions commercially and decide
Just to compare.
the cost of this aircraft versus commercial. And that really is not a very good comparison because you can't really put a dollar amount on the safety and security. We could have people handcuffed and shackled in our plane. We could be armed. And a commercial airline at the time, it was much more difficult than that. You couldn't handcuff prisoners. And flying armed was very, very difficult. So the safety and security in our aircraft really, it was a game changer, but it was just hard to justify. So we decided to sell the aircraft. People put in bids for it, and they were supposed to fly it on September 12th, 2001. Is that right?
At the time also, to go with that, the engines themselves are only good for 1,850 hours. And then you have to remanufacture or put on new engines.
And they're expensive.
It got up to around 30, 40,000 per engine.
Per engine, yeah.
And cost effective. It came to the point where it was sad for me. I really hated to see it go, but you've got to look at the overall picture. And Sheriff was right. It just got to the point where we had to think of some other avenue to.
But in hindsight, if I could have predicted that September 11th was going to happen, that would have been the time to have the aircraft after the skies opened back up.
We needed it.
We needed it then, and it was gone. But and as it turns out, it is. You'd be surprised, Larry, how much more streamlined the extradition process is on commercial aircraft. They not in the past you couldn't have a prisoner restrained. Now you have to have, and so the FAA and Homeland Security have really looked at that in a very good, objective manner, and it's much easier to accomplish extraditions commercially than we ever used to.
But Larry, there was probably a time though when it was more cost effective to do our own.
Definitely. We did a case study, and this particular article was done by the Lincoln paper, and it detailed a year's worth of flying with extradition process, and they broke it down between traveling by air, traveling by car, and it was more cost effective for us at the time. And we got to remember, back in the time where speed limits were down 55 miles an hour on the interstate, and a lot of things occurred at the time that really helped out in this.
Yeah, it wasn't just airplanes; it was all the economic circumstances.
And with that aircraft, if you could pick up more than one prisoner, and we picked up prisoners for other counties that we'd bring them back here, and they'd come get them from here if they were in another state. And I remember times when you'd make 3 pickups in a day, and you could, I don't know how many miles you flew, but a whole bunch, and we're back here during, when the day was over, you were back in Lincoln with 3 prisoners, and we didn't have all the overtime to pay, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, there were some times when it paid off very well.
Yeah,
we had a roughly circumference area that we would fly in and back, there and back in the day. Denver, Dallas, Chicago, for example. We could go there and back. Going to Chicago, we had to go in Midway, The only thing is you had to have a reservation to land in Midway, and I still do today. But we would go into Midway. We'd have to rent a car. You have to drive downtown, get your waiver forms for your extradition process, and then go to Cook County Jail, which is only a mile from Midway, from where the airplane is. And they have one of the best security systems going, because when you drive in there, they search your car. You can't take your weapons in, and then you drive into their lot and get your fugitive, and then come back and so forth.
That took a lot of time.
It did, but we would get into Midway. Couple hours. Well, it was about 2 hours 45 minutes. I'd be in. This airplane flew 220 miles an hour, cruised, and pick up our bad guy. We would be on the ground a couple hours, be back in the plane, and have him back here.
Now,
You had a chance to eat at Harry Carey's before you came back.
It was close.
Larry knew which FBOs had the best food, and I think we always got gas in Fort Wayne, Indiana, because they had a really good cafe there at Fort Wayne Airport.
That and Farmington, New Mexico.
Okay, I didn't make it down there.
No.
Yeah, that had the best Mexican food going. Yes, whenever we'd go to Vegas or to L.A. or something, that was my first fuel stop, was Farmington, New Mexico.
Now, did you ever have a confrontation with the bad guys in the plane as it was flying, or any of that?
Well, we did at one point in time, and we had an individual decide to get up out of the seat and wanted to take over the airplane.
Big guy.
Very big. And it turns out that we were able to subdue enough that, and you mentioned Fort Wayne, but coming back, and I picked him up in New York. And Fort Wayne was my midpoint, either direction. And I called ahead and got a hold of the authorities there and said, hey, could you have meet me with the police department? We have a little bit of problem. So he wound up staying there. And afterwards, it was just like a bad dream, because every time anything came up, he filed it with, now, can I say that? NAACP. And he filed with FAA, and he filed all these things, of which I had to go through quite a bit. But that's the only time, because what was neat about this is, you can go up so high. You go to Breckenridge, and you get a little drowsy. Altitude. Well, these guys, if they get rebel rousy, I'd just climb a little higher, and they'd go to sleep. And you wouldn't have any problems with that. Now, I had to offer oxygen. We had 6 hours of oxygen on board, and part of the procedure of getting on the plane, I had to show them where the oxygen mask was, where the barf bag was, and let them know that if we get at altitudes, if you let me know, I'll turn the oxygen on. You can put the mask on. But normally, they didn't make it that far. And so I never really had any problems now. So one of the other humorous occasions I got a visit about, because I just saw the gentleman that was with me. We used to take reserve deputies. And that ended only because the state required a certificated individual as law enforcement. So, but I had an individual with me. We went to a place east of Albuquerque.
Okay.
And we're talking out in the flatlands, just a little airstrip there, and that was it. Now, I always landed in Las Vegas, New Mexico, for fuel whenever I'd go that south. And this place didn't have fuel, so I knew I had to be topped off anyway. So I landed there. And you start looking around, and there's nothing but cows. I mean, it's quite a place. So you get out, and you pick up there's a little phone box there. You pick it up, and the sheriff answers, and you tell him you're at the airport, and you're here to pick up Joe Blow. And he says, well, walk on in. It's about lunchtime. And we're saying, what? You know? And so you walk from this little phone box and you go across the cattle grates so they can't come out on the runway. And you walk into town, which isn't a couple of blocks, and he does. He's got lunch all ready for you. And I mean, this unusual, you know, really. So we get to get our lunch, get our bad guy, get back on the plane, and come back. But one thing you learned about in extradition process is whenever you go anywhere, you always get ahead of time with that particular agency and say, hey, we would like to save some time. Is there any way you could possibly bring our prisoner to us? Save us from renting a car and the time constraints and so forth. And I've got other prisoners on board. You know, what am I going to do with them? So you work it out. And really, most of the time, only thing it costs you is a patch. One of your shoulder patches.
Oh, yeah.
It was a big thing. I don't know what it is today, but
Still is.
it still is. So
That and challenge coins.
yeah, no, I didn't get into challenge coins, but yeah, we would change patches, and I wound up with quite an array of shoulder patches.
I'd imagine. After we got rid of our aircraft, you know, you had the commercial option, but that was probably certainly a change for the sheriff's office as far as having to rely on another agency then for some of the more traditional law enforcement operations that aren't extraditions, right?
Correct. We did use the Marshal Service. I understand they've changed that quite a bit now, but at the time, I was able to run down to Kansas City, and I'd meet the big jet. They'd bring my fugitive out, jump on the plane, and away we go.
Well, they still have Con Air, but I don't think they transport prisoners anymore like they used to. If they had space available, we could get a prisoner on their plane. Not so much anymore.
What about the? Remember, we had the West Coast agency, law enforcement agency. There was times we were able to
shuttle.
get
The shuttle,
And
Northwest Shuttle.
Yeah, that sort of got shut down in the COVID period, but it's ramping back up. So we still
Oh, it is.
we still have a sergeant that is our liaison to the shuttle. We work it out with those states and on the West Coast, Idaho, Montana.
Washington. Yeah.
That'd be West Coast.
You know,
Yes, it would be.
earlier you mentioned that we did transport for other agencies, and there was a national system that we could enter on the computer, and we would know where this individual might want to be taken to here and so forth, and we would work that out. And we did transport.
And as I recall, we had to have a heightened a Part 35 certification for the aircraft because of doing that.
Right.
If they were just our prisoners and our employees, we didn't have to have that level of maintenance.
Correct.
And whatever that's called.
And 135.
Okay,
Yeah,
135. Okay.
Yeah, it is, and that's something we had to watch for. And
It's expensive too.
as you recall, I took Charles Simons
Yeah.
several times. We would bring in, actually they would drive in from North Platte.
Didn't you bring the jury? Well, you took the lawyers out there
They,
to select the jury.
well, but prior to that, they would come in here, we'd have to get Mr. Simons out, put him in a plane with the deputies and the county attorney from North Platte and fly him to Birmingham, because the doctor that initially saw him moved to Birmingham, Alabama. And the courts here would only say, I want that doctor. He's the only one that can see him. So for 2 years I did that. I flew him down to Birmingham.
Wow.
And I had the situation where, I don't know if you recall the little boy Blue.
In Hebron?
Right. I actually, at the sheriff there, his request, we went down to Texas and got the person of interest regarding the death of that.
That was a
little-
bio dad, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And he didn't get charged with the ultimate penalty for that, but he was charged. And then I had to fly them back down there to,
A good example, I had some witnesses that I needed to interview on a crash investigation that were up in Laurel, Nebraska. And we had a prisoner that was going to the federal penitentiary in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So we all hopped, the deputy county attorney and me and the prisoner and another deputy hop on the plane. Larry lands in Wayne, Nebraska. The sheriff there loaned us a car. Larry takes off, takes the prisoner up to Sioux Falls. We go do the interviews that we needed to do with our with the people in the crash, and then Larry came back down and picked us
Scooped
up, and
you up.
off we come home.
didn't forget you.
Really, that's one of those times when it paid off to have the aircraft.
Oh,
and
certainly.
cut down a ton of travel
Yeah.
time.
In my logbook, I noticed there was several entries where I took individuals from the county attorney's office here back to Iowa City and Burlington for interviews on depositions that they needed for a case they were working in. And
Yep.
so
Interesting.
about the only other things I really got involved in is there was a district judge that liked me, and he says, "Hey, we've got this grand jury going on, and I want you to be the bailiff." So I got introduced to the grand jury process, which I didn't know anything about, and I did that for quite a few years. So, like I said, you wear a lot of different hats.
Oh, sure.
As time goes on.
Did you ever fly after LSO got rid of their aircraft? I mean, did you ever pilot aircraft after that, since then?
I would go up leisurely. I do not fly today. My medical would have to be renewed, and then my flight review. But I really have no ambition to. I had it made for years.
Yeah, yeah.
You
So that-
just can't go fly a helicopter and an airplane, and And
that was
not-
kind of
and
the end
not
of
enjoy
your
it.
the end of your flying days, though. Were kind of when the LSO aircraft
Right.
went away.
Yes.
Then.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Yeah, yeah. Well, today, we've moved on. I guess there would have been about a 17-year hiatus, because then in 2018 is when we started up our drone unit, or our UAS team, which is kind of our first foray back into aircraft since the fixed wing left. So that's what we're doing today. Chris Laird was really instrumental in getting that program up and off the ground, pun intended there. We made that joke several times as things were getting up and going. And, the technology has really just exploded with that. But we actually, our first drone that we had, we named it the Karnoppter 2.
Really?
We did. So we had
I didn't know that.
yeah, we had a sticker label on there, and it didn't quite have the fanfare of being named, with school children and trophies, but I think we heard about the story about the original Karnoppter, and that was the Karnoppter 2. So, but we've expanded now, and we've exchanged aircraft, and the technical term within the FAA is SUAS, which is Small Unmanned Aerial Systems. There's unmanned aerial vehicles. There's all sorts of other things, but ours are Small Unmanned Aerial Systems. And so we've gone through a lot of different brands and different styles and different equipment and payloads and things like that. But the drones that we're using now can fly indoors, can fly outdoors. And they've actually been, what started out as kind of more search and rescue, surveillance, evidence collection stuff, now has moved into more of a tactical direction. And so our tactical teams are actually using them to maybe go into places that it wouldn't be safe to send a deputy.
Oh, very much, or even a canine. And to be honest, you can trust the aircraft better than you can a dog, because you're the one being able to see what's going on. Now, they can't always open doors and do that, but it is much safer for the deputy and much safer for the suspect. we're not putting people in there where they may have to take action to save their lives. We're putting a drone in there and doing that. And we've had several tactical calls where it probably ended up saving us from being in the shootout.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the individual ended up taking his own life, but it was a lot better than us having to do it or a shootout occurring.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I remember the guy was laying next to the bed with a
Yep.
pistol.
and that's the case I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't realize he'd killed himself. I thought,
Yeah.
okay. But we got that door open, and he was still hiding with a pistol,
Mm-hmm.
and the drone went in, and you get a bird's eye view of this guy laying there with a gun beside him.
Yeah,
And
well, he was pointing in at the door initially.
they talked to him, and
at the very least, prevented an encounter.
deadly
An
encounter.
officer involved shooting. It did do that. And you can clear so much area, and you can get it in there, and you can, as they call, perch it, and just have eyes on in there.
Yeah.
And you can certainly soften up a room or a house a lot before you start putting canines in, before you start putting deputies into those situations.
And that was something, Larry, that was not something we initially thought of when we first started going into the drone world. Was that we would use them to fly indoors. That's certainly something you probably never thought about with the helicopter or the plane.
It's very interesting because my first drone, I have bumpers on it.
as do we.
Yep.
You got to learn how to drive those, and
You do.
And I'm so envious that every time I hear you, everybody talks about the drones here and what they can do and so forth. That, there I want to start flying again.
Right. Yeah.
Well, even on crime scene and crash scenes, and it can go into the Faro and all the data points and
Photographs. It does
the data.
all
And
the stuff we need to do.
I think initially people were really concerned that law enforcement were going to have these and they're going to be spying on us and all that. But as a technology, it has, it certainly has helped law enforcement and made us able to protect the public way better.
And we've put a lot of safeguards into our policy with the privacy concerns. There's a lot of case law out there as far as aircraft and what you can do with manned aircraft, that is, and how high you can fly, how low you can fly, things like that. But there weren't a lot of those things with drones because the technology was advancing so rapidly. So we really kind of took a conservative approach to the policy. And any time that we're flying for evidence gathering, we really require a search warrant, if we're going to somebody's property without consent. And I think that's just because we don't want to be that big brother type of thing. We want to make sure that we're doing things the right way and for the right reasons.
Well, just now with the case we're working with the missing individual, Tyler, you can get those up quickly and, and start to make your looks and do that. And, it's a lot cheaper than getting a helicopter because, Nebraska State Patrol will come out and help us. But a couple of battery recharges is a lot different than that part of it.
Fuel, pilots, mechanics.
Well, being able to land closer and get right down there if you think you see something.
Yeah. And so speaking of that, we're working an active missing persons case right now. Looking for Tyler Goodrich, and we hope that we can find him very, very soon.
Yes.
But they've been processing a ton of acres with thermal imaging, with zoom cameras and all those sorts of things, just looking for any sign of him. And that's really probably what started our interest, I think, in the drones, was to be able to provide some capability that I think the public expects from us. And it's something that we hadn't had since probably your days, Larry, with the helicopter and then the fixed wing.
You bet. I was out several times on missing persons and looking at, and, in reflection now, my understanding is to fly a drone, as you are doing, the individual that is actually operating the drone has to take the same tests that I did to get my private license.
They do. Part 107 of the FAA is what we get our pilots licensed under. So yeah, they're not licensed to fly manned aircraft, but yeah, they have to go through the same ground school and pilot license that a manned pilot would have to have. So
the only thing I regret in that aspect is I learned too late that because I was up to date biennial, right on down the road. I could have walked in and got it bang without having to take the test
Oh,
again.
shoot.
Oh,
And now, of course, but the drones that I have are just right around my house.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
we
hobby
don't-
type stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I do have them licensed as there's different procedures you have to go through to have this and that. But, I have in the past taken video from another hobby of mine that and put it into a scenario and use that works really well. So
well, the late Captain Leffler would put a fishing string and bait on his, go to the pond and catch fish and then fling them over.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. It was the funniest thing.
I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Believe it to him.
We're starting to somewhat make it full circle now because we talked about it briefly earlier. The sheriff mentioned our new TFO program, our Tactical Flight Officer program. And this is a new program that we're spinning up with the Nebraska State Patrol. They've ran into some issues where, pilots are limited on hours. So, if you've got two pilots that are up in the air at the same time, you're burning hours for both of those pilots.
Right.
And so they were wanting to be able to spread their resources a little bit further. And so we are partnering with them. They will have some TFOs along with the sheriff's office and the Lincoln Police Department.
Yes.
And the idea is that we will have deputies kind of be in the second seat in the helicopter, much like they were in your day, Sheriff. I think
They'll learn the night sun, and they'll learn a lot more than just that. But
yeah, a lot more, and they're going through selection process and training process right now. So we've just selected a few deputies to go through that after they went through some testing and evaluation to have them checked out. So
Well, we use the State Patrol a lot.
yeah,
we do.
And,
Yeah.
with our fugitive task
if
force.
their
and-
aircraft is operational and local, and we need them, they're up.
Yeah.
They really are a great resource for us.
Yeah.
Can't thank them enough for.
well, when the colonel asked
Yep.
us,
Yeah.
would we be willing? I mean, it was a no-brainer. I mean,
Yeah, because
how could you say no?
I'm aware of how much it costs to operate that aircraft
You
with
bet.
two pilots, and we're benefiting from that. And why shouldn't we help them out and try to absorb a little bit of that fiscal impact?
And it's another great thing for deputies to be able to do. I mean, I would have loved to have done that.
I would have loved to do that.
So, looking into the future, where we're at right now, with our UAS program, now with the TFO program, do you ever see a day that we would go back to manned aircraft at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office?
Space Force.
Maybe we could be the first. The moon is going to need a sheriff's office. I mean, if we colonize that, we might
That
as well
would
be the
truly
first.
be a satellite office, right?
It would be
Yeah.
a satellite
Okay.
office. Yes.
It's nice. We're lucky that the State Patrol is housed here in Lincoln, and we're able to use them, just about any time we want. And you just got to choose. Like you said, it's an expensive.
I remember going up with the State Patrol on surveillance on some burglary suspects that, and the interesting thing, our aircraft really wasn't made for surveillance. It flew too fast. And would you agree, Larry? And
I agree.
And so
Yeah, you bet.
you really couldn't use our aircraft for surveillance. The 172s that the State Patrol has, they fly low and slow, and you can
High wing designs.
Yep,
You can see out the
exactly.
window.
And so that's you have to really evaluate what your mission is going to be. If it's working traffic and working surveillance, then that aircraft is the way to go. If you're doing multi-state extraditions, you need a little bit faster aircraft.
And as long as commercial air travel stays the way that it is, I think it would have to change quite a bit to make the twin engine economical again.
We generally have 10 days from when we get notice of a fugitive being apprehended in another state to get him back here. 10 days isn't much time, and you don't get very good airfare,
Right.
with 10 days notice. And so that's one of those things that's it's still tipping the evaluation period.
I think with the shuttle though, it helps us enough that
It
it because that's free.
If we had to fly to California for every one of these, it would add up quick.
It would add up quick, but now that we don't have to do that, I think
We're
that's
still
the
flying
changer.
about 90 extraditions a year. So that's,
Yeah, it goes
almost 2 a week.
Yeah,
We've
it goes
got
from
deputies in the year.
like 70 to 100, just in that time, that range every year on those.
Yeah.
You know, I heard the podcast with Phil Lang, and one thing that he didn't mention that I'd like to just pass along is he was alluding to fugitives and the extradition process in the asylum state and the demand. There's also another aspect that if we have an individual that is incarcerated in a federal system or in just incarcerated, he has to have more than 6 months left. But there is a form, what they call Form 6,
Yes.
where they can make demands, say, hey, you want me, you got to come get me
Yep.
and bring me back. Well, what they're trying to do is they want to have their time running where they're at and also time running with you. So, and our courts are receptive to that. I mean, why house a guy here when we can get him taken care of elsewhere too.
And some of those guys and gals are hoping that maybe a local jurisdiction might say, to heck with it. And if they don't come get them, then it goes away.
That has happened because you contact county attorney's office, and if the case is really iffy and or where they determine that it's not going to be worth bringing them back, then they have to recall that warrant or that hold off that individual. So, which works really well.
Yeah.
And you haven't really lived till you go to a federal penitentiary to pick up a bad guy. It is a blast. And I'll just bring one case up real quick is, let's say we're going to go down to Springfield and Greene County. We go to the federal pen there. You get off, you walk up, you have to go stand next to a tower. A guy will lower a bucket on a rope, and you have to put your weapon in that bucket. He'll pull it back up, and then they'll let you in.
A bucket.
A bucket.
Nice.
Yeah. And then they let you in and then say, hey, it's time to leave now. So they won't let you leave until you have a belly chain, you have shackles, and thank you. And he's buttoned up pretty good before you get out of there. And so we then go back out and you say, hey, woo-hoo, I want to leave now. So the bucket comes back down and you get your weapon. And in that respect, and I'll just tell one more little tale out of school. I had Joanne with me, and we were coming back from the New York area, but I had to go into Pennsylvania to a federal penitentiary there to pick up an individual. We had a rental car. We drove up to the entrance, which is, there's probably a couple hundred yards from where their big sign marquee is, federal penitentiary this way. And we got out and we took a picture of one another, standing in front of this sign. Hey, this is pretty cool. Just... And
they didn't think it was so funny.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. We were surrounded, and so by the time it all happened and everything's over with, they would let me in, but they wouldn't let Joanne in.
Oh.
So I got our bad guy, came back out, got him loaded, got him in the plane, took off. And I'll tell you, the runway isn't that far from that penitentiary. I climbed up, got circled over, and took a picture of that place from the air, and I mailed it back to him. I said, okay, anybody can take a picture of this, but that was their big concern. They don't want anybody to see, what's going on. But it's it's fun.
Well,
I'm hoping they've got better technology than a bucket now in this day. I'm just hoping.
This was not, I've been gone since 06. And this would have been, in the 90s. And because they are also the one and that was something I didn't talk about earlier, is we looked pretty close at the medical history or the health of the individual that we're going to transport. Because you don't want anybody with a bag. Correct. Yeah. And so I'm out flying around, I'm coming back, and they say, hey, there's one to pick up in the federal pen there at Springfield. And they brought him to the airport for me. I landed at Springfield. They loaded the guy in. He throws him in the back seat. It's a pretty nice setup, and boom, we're on our way. And we got almost back to Lincoln, and this guy decides to have the big one. He is just going out. I call ahead, and I get emergency medical coming, and we land. Fortunately, the individual that was with me grabbed the mask. I pulled on the oxygen, and we threw a mask face on him, got him all set up, and fortunately, I think that's the only reason he lived. But emergency medical gets there on a ramp, and all of a sudden, the front of the plane starts raising up in the air. It's a tricycle gear. There's so many EMT guys diving on the back of this airplane. The plane starts
Tipping the plane over.
Doing a wheelie.
I'm saying, wait a minute, you know.
Oh, my goodness.
So, I mean, those are just little side.
Oh. Well, Larry, we just can't thank you enough for coming in today and sharing stories with us, about the plane, about the Karnoppter, all the things that went into aviation here at LSO over the years. And we just really appreciate you being here.
Well, I really appreciate being invited and coming back. And, just for anybody listening that would want to get into law enforcement, believe me, it's worth it. I spent 39 years and don't regret it.
Can't hold a job, huh?
No, not anymore. So.
Well, that is all the time that we have for the 902 podcast today. If you are interested in some of the pictures from this episode, they'll be posted on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. You can find us at LSO Nebraska. Also be sure to subscribe and follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. And if you have questions, suggestions, comments, just want to drop us a line, send it by email over to lso@lancaster.ne.gov. Thanks for listening.